It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Chaim Hershko Laszlo. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Jerusalem. And Chaim, it is such an honor and a privilege to be here with you. I'm so grateful to you. And you've accomplished unbelievable what you've done in your life and how you've, it's just amazing. So Chaim, can you tell us a little bit about your family and your story?
Yes, of course. So I should start with early childhood. This is me at age 1. I was born in Hungary in a little town, population 25,000, called Karcag in the eastern plain of Hungary. Now, I have to explain how Hungary is built. It's all surrounded by the Carpathian Mountains, but inside there is a basin which is almost sea level. So in the early times it was the floods from the Danube and the Tisa rivers made it uninhabitable at the part that I was born. But then the marshes were drained and it's extremely fertile land and a happy place as I remember it.
What year were you born, Chaim?
1936. So that was 3 years before World War II. But it was already difficult times, and my father was recruited for basic training 6 months in the Hungarian army. And note please that in spite of anti-Semitism, Jews were still considered equal by the law, and they had to serve in the army, and they even had careers, and many Hungarian Jews distinguished themselves in the First World War and were decorated and so forth. Didn't have them much, but this is the truth. So this is me, quite happy in Karcag, 1936. This is our house. Now, I visited my hometown several times with each of my grandchildren. And this is Rina, my wife, standing in front of the house where I was born. It is a big house with 3 beautiful rooms and all the other accessories. This is how it looks like now with the present tenant, who is not a relation to us.
Did she allow you to go inside?
Yes, it's it is a very pleasant experience when you go to home after 60 years and knock on the door. Everybody is happy, smiling.
And did you have recollections inside?
Of course. So this is the house, and these are my first steps in front of the house, dressed up formally in a navy uniform. And just to remind you that Hungary has no sea, so this was quite remarkable. And my parents dressed formally, my mother with hat and gloves, and my father had, it was very fashionable at that time, the 2 colors to the shoe. This is brown and this is white, and this is considered to be very elegant. And this is my happy family, my father, my mother, and my kid brother, who is a Nobel laureate. At that time he suffered a lot from me because usually I was 2 years older than him and very dominant. But he forgave me for that. Here we are managing very nicely a beautiful garden. My father loved the garden and cultivated it, and you can see it's all full of flowers, and in the back there are fruit trees. This is the inner court of the house, and there was plenty of place for playing, and this is the roses that my father was very proud of in the inner court. This is the veranda when we set us up the sukkah. At Sukkot holiday.
Was your family a traditional family?
Yes, they called themselves Orthodox, but moderate Orthodox. We were not fanatics at all. And we were observant to a certain limit. Our house was kosher, but that's mainly for the parents when they come to visit, they can eat. This is the same place with my maternal grandmother who lived in another city, but she was very happy coming over to her daughter and staying with us. Again, my brother and me. Now this is very funny because they are all shaved. And my father, who was a assimilated Hungarian Jew, he believed in that whatever the peasants were doing was healthy. So he said in the summer, if the weather allows it, you should go barefoot and you should have your hair cut because then the sunshine can get into your head. But so he made this without consulting my mother, and there was some scandal in the family. Now, this is in the back of the house, and I must tell you about this. In Hungary, country people didn't have money to send the elderly into protected houses, retired homes and so forth. So they built a small house in the backyard. And this is the little house for the elderly, but our elderly didn't need it yet, so it was rented to another family. And if you travel Hungary, you will notice they like to have big house, medium, small, and even smaller. So this was my favorite place for relaxing, because you see it's not very high, and so I could go up in the stairs and lie on my back and look at the clouds, and this is my happiest memory from our early childhood. Now this is not necessary. In the winter, this is where my maternal grandfather. Now this is my uncle who emigrated to Palestine and during the Holocaust was in Jerusalem. So he was, for us, it was the promised land that I have my beloved uncle Yechiel, and you see Yechiel here with me. We were very good friends in our house, and this is my grandfather, maternal grandfather, Yehuda Julius Wultz, who came to stay us in our home in Karczag. Now Julius has a very special story. He was born in Poland, and when he was 15, he left his house and alone he migrated to England. Why England and not America? There are stories about this, that the travelers were cheated. They got to Liverpool and they were told, this is America, get off my boat. And so he got to London, and he had difficult times, but he acquired British customs. And so you see, he's dressed in Hungary. People don't go around like that. And he was dressed like an Englishman with sorry.
Chaim, can I ask, why did he return to Hungary?
He was expelled. He was called one day, and the clerks told him, you go either to jail or you will leave immediately. He never had the means to take care of citizenship and so forth. He didn't want to go back to Poland, so he preferred Hungary and became a Hungarian, but with a heavy foreign accent. And my mother was always afraid that something will happen because his father is not Hungarian. And in 1941, the Hungarians collected all the Jews who were foreigners, and 15,000 of them were deported to the part of Russia which was already taken by the Germans, the famous Kamenetz-Podolsk affair, where all the Jews coming from Hungary were murdered and buried in mass graves. It's a terrible story. And at that time, Hungary was still normal. So for us to have this to happen was a terrible shock, because we didn't know that such hatred or such horrible things can happen in a civilized world. So anyway, my grandfather was afraid that he will be deported, but he was already deported once from England. But no, they let him alone. He was married to a Hungarian girl, my grandmother, and they ended up in Auschwitz.
And did they survive?
No.
They didn't survive.
I shall get to that, but I'm going chronologically. So at this point, I'm still very happy. In our house, you see, in the winter, my father even bought me a sled, which was built by a carpenter for our purposes. They couldn't buy such a thing. And in the summer, I had a bicycle in the garden. So I think I had enough evidence that I had a happy childhood.
Is he always smiling in the pictures?
Yes, yes. And by the way, my brother has a different set of mind, and he hates to think of what happened in Hungary. And I separate the personal nice experience from the bad things. And at this point, there was nothing to separate yet, because everything was all right. This is the synagogue of the Karczag community. Now, there were about 1,000 Jews in Karczag, but only one synagogue. In Hungary, it was already, the Kehilot were already united and organized, and so there was no room for Stibalach, for 10 Jews and so forth. And it was very nice, because we had community life. We had the Jewish school. My father was a school teacher. He was the head of the school. And everything looked all right. This is the kindergarten. This is me. And another picture of the kindergarten. This is me again. And you look at this picture, it is I think, graduation from maybe 4 years or 5 years, and everything looks okay. But about 1/2 of these children were murdered in Auschwitz, and I shall get to the details after that. This is the Jewish street, which had all the Jewish establishments. This is the synagogue, this was the Jewish school, and my paternal grandparents lived in the house opposite the synagogue. These are my maternal grandparents.
They were very religious.
Everybody was religious, but they were employed by the community. He was, you see, he was not a rabbi, he was a cantor. And there's the beautiful this is German customs, the Jews already imitated the clergy. So he had all the proper equipment for that, my grandmother. This is my mother and Uncle Yechiel, who immigrated to the Holy Land, and they in their garden. And these are my paternal grandparents. They lived opposite the synagogue, and my grandfather was taking care of everything there for the Kehillah, the reading the Torah and the circumcisions and the how do you call it, the sacrifice of the animals.
Shechting,
He was a community employee paid by the community, and we saved his life later, and I should tell you about it. And this is how my grandmother and her, at that point, 5 children, but altogether she had 6. And this is a reunion of my aunts and uncle and my father here. maybe 50 years later, at a later stage. My father, he loved our house, and the middle room was the library. He was relaxing, and you can imagine in Karzai, a place like, it was almost a village. For him this was an escape, and he was a Zionist already at that time. And these are his classmates from the teacher's seminary. This is the teacher's seminary. This is the same room now. So it's still a beautiful house, and I really love it. You were welcome, and we sat down this is the living room, and you can see everything is okay. They even have a television. Okay, now the bad part. In 1942, when I was 6 years old, my father was drafted to the Hungarian army, not as a soldier. Please sit down. Not as a soldier, but as a first labor battalion. And in fact, all the young men of the Hungarian Jewish community, say, between 80 to 100,000, were drafted and sent to the Russian front, where the Hungarian army, it didn't participate 100% with the Germans, but they were supported the Germans, supporting. So about 1/3, I think, of the Hungarian army was on the Russian front, and they intertwined with the Germans and coordinated and so forth. And it was all right as long as it was all right for the Germans. But in the end of 42, they got to Stalingrad, and in the winter of 42-43, the Germans started to collapse. Why? Because of over-expansion. It was the megalomania of all the dictators. Is not the same. They think that now they are surrounded by people who never say no. So they have no chance to correct their mistakes. And that was the big mistake of Hitler, that he overexpanded. He miscalculated the size and the willpower of the Russians.
And can I just mention with Stalingrad, I think that was
Stalingrad was the turning point, but after 6 months there was another major clash at Kursk. And Kursk was more important than Stalingrad because that broke the backbone of the German army. After that it was just a slow, protracted process of retreat. Now, so my father got there in the end of 42, just before the Stalingrad turning point, and after that he spent most of the 2 years in retreating on foot from the Don to the Hungarian border. It was all 300 kilometers he did on foot. In the Russian winter, you can imagine how difficult it was. And he had one thought, this will to see us again after this is over.
Can I just interrupt and ask you, do you remember when your father left?
Yes, I remember. Yeah, I was 6 years old. I didn't understand what was going on, but he called me to the backyard, the privacy of the backyard, my home, at home. And he told me some important things that I didn't understand, but it was more or less about, you are now the man of the house and you behave yourself and help your mother and so forth. He had no idea that he's not going to see us for 4 years. And we only got 3 letters from him, and through the Red Cross and so forth, and he had no idea that there was a Holocaust. He only spoke Hungarian. He didn't speak Russian. And they were isolated. They were first mistreated by the Hungarian army. It was forced labor. And then when they became prisoners, the Russians told them, "You are Hungarian army." So they were treated like the Hungarians. And nobody cared to tell them what's going on, except they knew that the war is over and so forth, but had no idea when they will release them. They continued to survive in forced labor camps. 4 years. And then he got back, and that was also a terrible experience, because when they got back to Moscow, they were in the Caucasus. And so they had to travel a week by train to get to Moscow, to the Hungarian embassy, to get their papers which permit them to go back to Hungary. And then the first time in 4 years, they got access to Hungarian newspapers. The Hungarian embassy had a library with all the newspapers, and then they found out that there was a Holocaust, and probably nobody waits for them at all. And for the majority, this was the case. Okay, so what the picture you see here is the ghetto. Not the ghetto, it was the last station of the ghettoization in Hungary in the summer of 1944. So what happened to us, one day, it was 19th of March 44, the Germans invaded Hungary because they got rumors the Hungarians want to participate, to get out of the deal with the Germans and to retreat. And that was a catastrophe for the German army, so they didn't argue, they just invaded Hungary. And in the Hungarian army there were many collaborators with the Germans. It was already a Nazi army. And so there were no fights at all. It was a silent takeover. But once they moved in the end of March, they started organizing with exterminating the Jews. At that time already, all the other countries were without Jews, because it was 44. It was almost 2 years after the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And anyway, they started operating. Now, the method was, you probably heard this from others also, first they had to isolate the Jews. So they announced that the Jews had no more freedom to travel by train. They had to turn in their telephones, those were telephones, and they had to wear a star to be isolated, to be identified from the age of 5 or something like that.
And you wore the star?
Yes, I remember the yellow star. And so that was the first thing. Then they said, now you have to move to designated places. These were the ghetto. So in Karsak there were already at that time only some 600 Jews, because many left before because of the economic difficulties. So they designated a place near the cemetery where the poorest of Karsak resided. So they moved out the tenants, and they moved in the Jews and surrounded it by a fence. So that was the first thing they had done to us.
Can I ask you, do you remember leaving your home and going to the ghetto?
I remember everything. Leaving our home, we were ordered to put all the equipment, furniture and so forth into one room so they can seal it, and so that was the order. Then so we helped my mother to move the things, and I remember the room where we put the furniture and all that. Then on the designated morning, which was a few days later, there was a committee which came with 2 gendarmes. The gendarmes were frightening militia. that was established to fight the rural troublemakers. So they were half army, half police, and extremely rude. So they came with bayonets and all that, and for me it was very interesting because I've never seen a gendarme do from so close. And at that time I remember I had two treasures. One was a post stamp from Romania with a beautiful picture of the Romanian king, and the other was a prisma that I got from somewhere, that if you looked at it, they could see multiple words and also color, blue, and so I thought as long as I can keep my treasures, I don't know what happens. In fact, it was in May, so it was a beautiful weather, and everything looked like a picnic, because nobody harmed us at that point. It was all frightening a little bit, but we had to move. I was used to spend the summer somewhere on the Lake Balaton and so forth, so it looked to me like another way of camping. And it was not frightening at all, and my mother did everything to reassure us that it's just an inconvenience, but nothing serious. So we have been in the ghetto for about 1 month, and then we were ordered to...
When you went to the ghetto, did you see the neighbors? Did any of the neighbors see you marching to the ghetto or leaving the home?
Yes, yes. And some of the neighbors were even nice. There was one lady, well, first of all the Jews tried to place their valuables with their neighbors, with their non-Jewish neighbors. What happened later when those who came back and asked for their things, they said the Russians have already taken it. Or they were also digging the valuables in the ground, and but I haven't seen that, I only know about it. And so that neighbor was always very nice to us, and he told my mother, "Leave me the boys, I shall take them out and hide them." And so it almost happened, but my mother didn't realize that we were in danger of life, and anyway, I think she did the right thing that she... but there were neighbors who were decent. There was also, my mother used to tell us, there are lots of stories in the family, anecdote. The gypsy woman came to our garden and told her, "Now we have the common fate." So it was a great pleasure to become gypsies. Anyway. So after about a month in the Karza ghetto, we were put on train and transferred to Solnok, which is a bigger city, and in which there was a camp for 6,000 Jews.
And in the ghetto, did you have enough food, or was there already...
No. In the ghetto, in Karza, it was still all right, more or less. We didn't notice much. But in Solnok, we didn't get food, and my mother managed to buy some how do you call it, cabanos. You know what cabanos is? Very tasty, thin sausage.
Sausages.
So she buys some non-kosher sausage that was available, and also some dry cookies, like biscuits, homemade. And she put it in a little bag. And the only thing I remember that because this was the only food we had, and for a long time, a couple of weeks, the sausages became rancid. They were stinking. And it was mixed up with the cookies, and this is what we ate but at least we were not hungry. So this is what they had. Later they set up a kitchen, but just for soup and for very little. They did take care of food and didn't take care of sanitation. So the way it was solved, most of the families with children had a night pot, a chamber pot. And that was used by the children at night because we couldn't get out to relieve ourselves. Also, there were no proper toilets, but later they made us dig up facilities where you could sit and relieve yourself, but no privacy. It was terrible. There were adult people in front of the children doing their thing. Now, you asked me about the reaction of the Gentiles. There was still something I remember. When we were taken from the Karta ghetto to the railway station by lorries, we were driving through the main street of the township, and it was Sunday, because it must have been Sunday, because there were lots of young people dressed up in Hungarian folk dresses, the white and so forth. And when we passed by, they were jeering. Nobody was, at least those who were there, nobody was sorry for us.
And you remember,
I remember, because it was the most terrible thing, They can do different things, you don't know, and you don't understand what's the meaning of this. But jeering is something that it was terrible. So the Hungarians were happy that they were taken away. By the way, they always claim now that it was the Germans, not us. But it was done by Hungarians. The Germans only, Eichmann and his group were less than 200 German soldiers. And so all this job was done by the Hungarians, mainly the gendarmerie, and the gendarmes were terrible people. You think of it, these are people paid by the government to maintain law and order, so they are protecting us. We are citizens. But suddenly you find that you have no rights, they're not protection, and the protectors of the law are those who are killing you. So the children always ask me, when did you find out there is a Shoah? And my answer is, it was in Solnok, where 6,000 people were crammed into this factory. It was abandoned already. This is a sugar factory of Solnok, Jewish of course, but it was at that time already abandoned. And so this is where they put us. And then after another 3 weeks or so, the trains came again. The trains could get to the backyard of this facility. So we haven't seen trains, railway stations or anything like that. We were handled like merchandise, going from here to there. And there were 2 train loads starting out from Solnok, and each train is about 3,000 Jews, because the formula was that they crammed 70 people in each of these cattle trains and cattle cars, and the number of cars was about 3,000. So altogether 3,000 people in one train load. And Auschwitz was handling each day 3,000 times 4 to 6 train loads. And if you got to Auschwitz, it was if you were a child, you had no chance of survival at all. With the others, it was about, they picked 15% or so as labor forced labor, and the rest were also destined to the gas chambers. Now, there were two trains, and the Jews had the right to determine who was on train A and on train B. Nothing was formal, but there were rumors that train A was a better place, we went to a better place than the train B. And we even got messages from the Central Committee in Budapest that orders to the local committees in the ghetto that when they are making the list of people on train A, they should consider people who are employed by the Jewish community, scientists, families with men working in the army at the front, and families with multiple children. Now, and there were rumors that it may be worse to be on train A, but nobody knew. It could be the other way around. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was a very strong person. And she heard about the committee working on lists, so she went to the committee, and she found out we were not on list A, and she told the chairman of the committee, was from Karzai, that she had the right to be on the first train because her husband is an employee of the committee, of the community, and because the two sons are in the front working, and because the children and so forth, so they were admitting us to that list, but they refused to admit our great-grandmother, who was still alive, was with us, and we were forced to leave her alone to take the second train. And the people who were on the second train, with also a few who survived Auschwitz, said that when they got to Auschwitz after 3 or 4 days of the terrible experience with no water, no food, and no sanitation, she was already not alive. So this is the story up to the point of Szolnok. I cannot tell you about Auschwitz because fortunately I was not there. But how do I feel about that? After that we got to Austria, to a little camp where forced laborers were kept, but in relatively humane conditions. We didn't have guards. They trusted us that we should not try to escape. There was nowhere to escape. And we were there for 1 year, and after that liberated by the Russian army.
So the train A went to Austria?
Train A went to... Now I want to tell you about this, because I should tell you things that I didn't experience personally. Train A, this was a deal by the SS that tried to negotiate a separate agreement with the Americans. They feared the Russians only because the Russians, they knew they will catch them, they will hang all of them, and they did. So they tried to negotiate. Now, how can you negotiate with the enemy? Through the Jews. The Jews are, the Nazis, they believed their lies. They thought the Jews are controlling the Western world, and if the joint, they wanted just money from the joint and the Jewish agreement, and they sent a messenger, you probably heard about him, is Brandt. The deal, the fact that they were negotiating was
it was Brandt.
An opening, Brandt. I know his son is a good friend of mine, and we communicate.
I know Danny.
You know Danny? You know everybody.
No, he did a whole research.
Yes, he has books. I even put here the book with the maybe you would like to take a picture.
I have it in English. I got it
The
from
German text of Kaltenbrunner, the letter by... No, I mean not the book, but in the documents attached to the book, there is a letter from the head of the SS in Berlin, Kaltenbrunner, to the governor of the Vienna, confirming that he is sending 4 trainloads of Jews to help the Vienna, around the villages around Vienna with the summer work. And these are our trains. They got, instead of Auschwitz, we got to a place named Strasshof. So this whole episode is named after Strasshof because these were the only trains that were already loaded for Auschwitz, but they went to another place. And the point was that the Germans wanted to go on with the killing the Jews, with the extermination, but put aside some samples so that when they negotiate, they could say, these are the Jews, you can have them. And altogether some 15,000, which is a major achievement because the famous Kastner train was only 1,600. So you have 10 times as many. And these are the older children who were on the trains and survived. So I want to tell you a funny story. When I was at the sabbatical Los Angeles, I was still at Hadassah at that time. The Hadassah ladies invited me to talk to them, tell my life and how is it in Israel and so forth. And so I told them that I was born in 1936 and I got to Israel in 1950. And no reaction, but there were 2 elderly ladies, nicely dressed like my mother, with hat and gloves and all that. And they came up to me after the lecture and said, we enjoyed very much your talk, but how come you're alive? In Hungary, no one at your age survived the Holocaust. And it is true. But it is only true for the provincial Jews, because they didn't manage to do the same in Budapest, and this is why about half the Jewish community of Hungary survived, which is still the best figure for all the other countries taken by the Germans. So this is our story. Now, just to tell you the epilogue, we came back on foot, and then I was very happy to see my birthplace, the house, which was abandoned, but it was still there. Everything.
Nobody had taken it over.
They took it, but they already deserted when they knew we were coming back. So the house was empty, we could enter and live there. My mother had terrible memories of that place, and she wouldn't hear of it. So from that point, we haven't been to our house, only a brief visits and so forth. And it was the property of my grandfather, so they sold it later, but there was no continuation to the happy life we had before. And I remember something which was symbolic of the tragedy. In the veranda, the entrance from the inside, we had flower pots, and we had these ferns that were always green and beautiful, and they were on the shelves and so forth. And the shelves were still there, but all the plants were dead. And when I tried to pull it out, it was full of roots that were looking for survival, and the roots were dead. And this was for me, that I understood that the world that I remember is no longer. So little things that are more important than 100 stories. And so after that, my father came back only in 46. And so we were there in 45. So for 1 year, we didn't know is he alive or not alive. But people came back, some people. And my mother decided to wait, like many other women also. And one day my father came back. Now that's another story that my father describes the night when he landed in Kartsay, coming back. And he had no idea if we were alive or not alive. And the train stopped near Kartsay, so he got off. It was not a station, he got off because he knew the place. And in the middle of the night, alone, he was walking back on the main street to our house. He got to our house and he didn't dare to knock on the door. So he went around and looked in and he saw the furniture is not ours. So he thought the worst has happened, we are no longer. Then he went on and he got to the house of his parents, opposite the synagogue and the school. And then he didn't dare to knock on their door. Instead, he saw that there is a childhood friend of his, a shoemaker, who had his shop next to there. So he knocked on the window, and so they said, "Who is there?" "Moshe." This is my name, Moshe. They called him Moshe. And he said, "Moshe, everybody is alive." He didn't open the door. So then my father entered the house, they opened the door and he sat down. And he said a terrible cry was burst out of his mouth. It was just, something like all the suppressed feelings suddenly coming out. And then so this friend ran to the house of my grandparents and they said, "Moshe is alive, is he?" And Moshe came and my grandfather opened the window to the street and he didn't want to obey, so he lifted him up with his arms. And he is the firstborn, and my grandfather, for all these years when he was not home, he was fasting, like religious people do. Twice a week he was fasting for his return.
Sure. Chaim, it is so emotional. It's so...
Yes, yeah.
And how was when you saw your father?
And I haven't been to Auschwitz. The destruction, the terrible things, they happen there. For me, it's the disappearance of my friends, of my world, of the flower pots in the home. And so that's the tragedy. That's the real tragedy.
Can I ask you, when you saw your father, how was that interaction, that reunion when you saw your father?
You have to understand we were living there for 4 years without him. So every night we prayed, and we prayer in Hebrew and then in Hungarian, and it included also priests sent us, please God, send our father back to us so we can hug him and kiss him. And when he came back, we didn't cry. It was quite different. And he was waiting for us at the railway station, because before that he found the orphanage where we were put up with my mother, and so he expected us, and he was there when the train stopped. And when we came back and we hugged, the people around say that was already 2 years after the liberation of Hungary. They said, "Oh yes, the devotees are back." because they were in his bags, and they thought that we came from the deportation. So that was they didn't understand, nobody cared. Or my father discovered that the school, there is no school, there are no children. And so after a few days at home, in our grandparents' home, he went to Budapest, and he got, in no time at all, he got employed by the Zionist organization. One thing I have to tell you, that the Joint and the Zionists did a marvelous job. The Joint, because if you have money, you can help people not to die of hunger. And the Joint was, they had a way to control or to contribute to the life of the survival of Hungarian Jews by just money. And it was very easy because the Swiss, the Swedes, and some South American consulates were open in Hungary. And Turkey was also. Turkey was the main route of smuggling money and letters and so forth. So made no problem at all, had no risk at all. By diplomatic means, they were sending money all the time. There was no lack of money. So they could bribe the Germans. You know that Freudiger, you know the name Freudiger? Freudiger got out of Hungary in a train with 100 attendees. It's a controversial story because he was the leader of the Orthodox community, and he deserted them and paid Vyshliceni the money, and a lot of money, to get a special train with 100 family members and friends and go in the broad daylight, go to Romania and serve himself. This is what happened. And he testified against Kastner. I shall not tell you what my judgment about Kastner is. He is controversial.
It's a very difficult...
Yes, but he was a typical Jewish adventurer. And only this could function at that time. So he was able to, he did what he did because he was able to do it.
And I think people that went onto the Kastner train, also some were very wealthy. They had to pay to go onto the train.
Yes and no, because the Kastner train, they had the committee that made up the list was not Kastner, it was Otto Komoy and Szilágyi, very decent and respected people. And Kastner was very careful not to be blamed for selecting. Of course, he had his family and so forth.
They also brought in rabbis.
Yes, but the intentions were good, and they went from the Zionist organization. They could get there whoever. They also took rich people because they needed their money to bribe the Germans. So the Kastner, and he had a part in the Strasshof story also, because he was the one who was informed by what's his name, by the SS, that there was a possibility to salvage 100,000 Jews. Now, another story, I don't want to get into this because I'm not an expert. My feeling is that the Zionists or the Jewish representatives in Istanbul didn't understand the potential of the German offer. They were meaning it, and my life is thanks to what they have done, because it was the negotiations, the so-called negotiations with the Germans. And the truth is they didn't mean to save all the Jews, and the Israelis, the Sochnut and so forth, didn't understand that this is a game, that if they if they preserve the life of such and such, then they will get some, they wanted their money and the goodwill of the Americans. The Americans were very careful, and they didn't completely oppose this negotiation, because McClelland. And McClelland was the head of the Council for Refugees. You remember that?
Roosevelt, I think it was Roosevelt.
Yes.
With President Roosevelt that was at the time.
He was appointed by Roosevelt.
By Roosevelt, yeah.
And McClelland knew that it was just a game, but Himmler wanted to save his neck, and Becher, who was a good friend of so-called friend of Kastner, he managed to save his neck and even save the money, because he became a very rich man, you know. After the war, he became the #1 dealer in agricultural products against in opposed to the Americans. So he was a very important person. They trusted him, and Kastner recommended him, and it cost his life.
Yeah. But
why did he do it? He was ordered by at that time we needed desperately money to buy arms. It was 46, 47, you remember at that time, and we won the war because of the arms deals. That was the big difference. The beginning of the war, I just finished the book about 1948, and at the beginning of the war, when the English left the country, we had no arms. It was ridiculous, nothing. And 5 airplanes or something like that. And after that, they joined money, bought the arms. The money came from American Jews. The arms came from the surplus of the Russian and Czech army. And at the end of the war, we had the Israeli army got twice as big. It started 40,000 and did 80,000, and had everything. Had airplanes and tanks, and even I thought always that the volunteers that participated in the war were Jewish South Africans, and it's true, there were many South African Jews with army experience, but there were also Gentiles.
There were from South Africa had the highest percentage of machal, of volunteers.
Yes, but they were not all of them were Jewish.
Not all were Jewish, it's true.
So it was again money from the Jews.
Can I ask, when did you leave Hungary?
1950. No, this is something that in my lectures I never forget, but I forgot to tell you. Coming here in 1950, the mentality of the Israelis was that it happened to them because they are Galuti, they are diaspora Jews. It could never happen to us because we are sabres and brave and all that. And it was a shame to disclose that you came from the diaspora. It was always the children, you know, always want to blend into the background, and nobody notices your accent and so forth. But there were expressions like Tzon Retevach, Sabonim, the soap. This was all against the survivors, that they were other people, and it is I think it's a natural psychological reaction. When something terrible happens, you say it happened to them, it could never happen to us. In Germany, it was the Ostjuden as against the the proper Jews from Germany. In America, it's still, it's not an honor to be a refugee from the death camps. Anyway, it was almost a secret at that time, not to speak about it. This attitude changed after the Eichmann affair, because then suddenly everything was open. It's like an abreaction in psychology that you open up your wounds and you heal yourself. So that was the first time that the diaspora was mentioned, not derogatory, but in the other way it could happen to us. Now, a big change was the involvement of children. In Israeli schools, at a certain age, usually at 12 or something like that, the children are asked by the teacher to interview the elderly, those who are survivors of the Holocaust. And it's a beautiful story because suddenly you are asked not by enemies but by friends. Your grandchildren, they understand you.
It's Shorashim.
Yes. So it was a sort of healing that the Israeli community, then those who were not there, is now respecting and understanding to a certain level. There are still things that could be better. Taking care of the survivors could be much better. This whole organization, I don't like it. I don't like the organized tours to Auschwitz because they are not sincere and they cost money and they discriminate poor children from rich children.
Can I just ask, in some schools, like my daughter's school, those that could afford to go, they also had a fund for the children that couldn't afford to go, and the parents donated. Yes,
okay, but in principle, this is wrong.
That's true.
But there can be done things that improve it or correct them.
Can I ask, did your parents speak to you about the Shoah when you were growing up? Could you talk about it with your parents or with your brother? Did you speak about the Shoah?
Never.
Or what happened to you?
Never. The only way was my father, like I wrote a book, my father also wrote a book about it. He was the first, a lot of time before me, and so he recorded his experience, but that was different. That was not the Shoah, it was the terrible experience of the forced labor regiments that only a minority survived. The survival of my family, with my father coming back from a place where he had maybe 1 in 10 chance of surviving.
Did he ever mention why it took him a year to come back after the war had finished?
It's Russia, you don't know Russia.
It was hard to get, it was hard to leave.
The Russians, they decided that after the war, that the Ukrainians are traitors. This is war with Ukraine didn't start now. And which is partly true. The Ukrainians hated the Russians so much that many of them volunteered to the German army. Now, after the war, all the Ukrainians who were taken prisoner, they didn't volunteer, they were taken prisoner by the Germans, were sent to the concentration camp. When my father was liberated by them, they offered him a choice. They said, you can volunteer to our army, and then you come with us to the front. He didn't like the idea. Or you go with the prisoners. It was, he had the choice. And he decided not to go, he took the risk, and that took him another 2 years. Now, there is no freedom of correspondence or information and so forth. Part of this was because he didn't understand Russia after 4 years in Russia. But the other is that people just didn't inform each other. It's a fact, he didn't know about the Holocaust. For God's sake, from Karsak, about 50% of the children were killed in Auschwitz because 2 trains. If you're on the wrong train, you didn't survive. So the exchange with my parents was very limited, and all I know from my parents is from the book of my father, in which he was very, very open about everything. And my father also interviewed my mother about our experience. So in my book, I have 3 chapters. So one chapter is the memories of a child, with the limitation the child doesn't understand, but has feelings, very genuine. The memories of my mother, which was an interview with my father, and very nice. Every detail is there. So. And the third is documents. And I have in my book fantastic documents. They related directly to us. One is a list of the Karsak Jews with addresses and family trees and all that had to be handed in to the Germans. So this was the list of the condemned. If you were on the list, you go to Auschwitz. The second is the document that describes the instructions given for the first action of train load to Auschwitz, which was not in our place, but they started up in the north, in the Carpathians. And so that was the details how what you do, make a list of the valuables, what to do with the farm animals in Jewish homes. They had everything worked out. There was a dog, we called him Pizzi, who adopted us. In villages, you had dogs. So he came there, and we as children liked him. We called him Pizzi. And so he was part of the family. When we were deported, Pizzi stayed at home. And somehow he survived, because when we came back, he was still there. But they had explicit orders of what to do with the property. They said the wristwatches were to be on the list, but alarm clocks not. They were not interested. And they didn't have a sense of humor. And then they ended the session with the order that there is no place for being rude, which is not in line with the Hungarian character. So they even were proud of themselves. They were human. And there's an expression there. You will find it in my translation. An expression about what was there? Yes, that widows and decorated ex-soldiers are not to be exempted.
That was also in Germany. The same thing happened.
Yes, they adopted these documents from the German. But the Hungarians, it's very funny. All these gendarmeria, who were really an instrument of the Germans, didn't speak German. They were uneducated village people. You can't imagine how simple the rural Hungarians are. There are old people who have never been more than 20 miles from their hometown in their life.
And this was the Arrow Cross?
No. Arrow Cross, no. The Gendarmerie was like Mishmar Agboul here. It's an army, okay? It should be, on paper, should be objective and only protecting the population from wrongdoers. The Arrow Cross was a political party.
They were very cruel, they
were crazy. They were primitive, and they did a lot of harm. They were not liked by most of the Hungarians. the extreme. They were killing Jews to the last minute. Budapest was already surrounded by the Russian army. They were under siege, and they were still walking the streets looking for Jews and taking them to the Danube River and shoot them into the water. And in the last hours, Otto Komoy, who was really, he should be, he should have a statue, and I think there are some places that are named after him.
He should be better known. He should,
but he was a real hero, a tragic hero, because he was taken from the glass house on the 1st of January and killed by the Aerocross. In January, it was just a few days before the Russians took all of Budapest. They came to the glass house and they said, he and the vice, who was the owner of the place, and both of them were asked very politely to come for interrogation, and they will be returned in a few hours. And somehow they decided to go. Maybe they had no choice, and never came back, never found.
In our shul, we have a Moshe Weiss, and his mother, literally the day before it was liberated, went out to look for food, and she never came back.
Right.
And he never saw his mother again.
Yeah. And Robbie Engelman, his father, was taken away when they were already in the glass house. They almost made it. His sister, she was the real hero. She didn't stay in the ghetto. She escaped with the young Zionists, and she came back and took them out of the ghetto and managed to deliver them to the glass house.
Can I ask, did you speak to your children when they were growing up? Could you speak to them?
My children know everything.
And you were open with your children?
Open, yeah. One of my grandsons, he asked me, how old were you when you came to Israel? I said, 14. And he said, and how was it? I said, it was all right. The children were nice to me. They never laughed at me. And he says, you probably didn't notice. And he's right. I didn't notice. I was happy, but I must have been funny, in my Hungarian Hebrew and dressed like a Hungarian.
And Chaim, can I just ask?
Do you know what the breeches are?
Yeah.
In Hungary, I think in England it was very fashionable. They had school children have breeches and white socks and so forth. So, dressed like that come to Israel. It's really like a joke.
And Chaim, with your parents,
yeah.
When they reunited, were they happy together? Did they have a happy marriage after the war?
Oh, that's
because it's a very, because they were separated for so long.
Yes.
And your mother remained. Yes. Your mother could have remarried. It's quite remarkable.
It happened to many couples that the woman despaired and married someone else, and then the spouse came back. No, in our case it was the ideal marriage. She was waiting for my uncle Yechiel kept writing us after the war. Come to Israel, I should take care of you. And we were determined to come. But my mother said I should not come until Moshe returned. So, and that was already 46. So there was a lot of time to be in doubt what happens. She got one letter from him, and that came after he was already taken by the Russians. I don't say liberated, it was not liberation. And so we knew that at that point he was alive. And that gave us the hope to wait longer and to trust that he will come back. And my grandfather was fasting twice a week.
Moshe, there are no words. This is incredible. And
now, I have a request to you. I have spoken too much.
No, I just want to
all right.
Moshe, I just want to ask.
It is right.
It's not too much.
Just your success.
Moshe, can I just... Can I ask you one...
Reducing me to tears. To all the young people.
This is your message that you give to the...
Yes, I gave it in the past also. We have to do our best to have a better future. That's it. To deserve a better future. Now the story is as follows. The deportation in Austria lasted about a year, and the original idea was to help the farmers in the summer. But the summer was over. So the Germans thought that they will reorganize and keep the working power, which was about 2/3 of our group, and to separate the children and the elderly, take them somewhere else. And this was the first time that we lived in the fear of being separated from our mother. And I didn't understand how serious it was, or apparently I didn't understand, probably I did, because my grandmother was washing our underwear and she was weeping at the same time. And I wondered, why she's crying. My mother told us that we are going to a place which is more proper for children, they will take good care of us. But she said, I want you to remember the address of Uncle Yechiel in Palestine, C/PO, P.O.B. 1085, 1085. And I engraved this in my brain because I knew that there will be no mother and I have to take care of my kid brother, and it was the hope that I had the address where I have to land. It was on Sunday. Monday, the adults went to work, and my mother knew that when she came back, she will not find her children. And in the afternoon, before the transport arrived, somebody came and told us the plans have been changed and you remain. Now, this was terribly frightening. And we didn't talk about this much, but we all remember that. Now, when I'm preparing my memories, and I had the letters that Yechiel got from Hungary, and I went through all the documents, and I've seen a postcard with the address C/PO, P.O.B. 1085. And I got the chills. And I said, how come? This is not imagination, this was real. And it is a miracle of psychology. But you don't remember numbers like that. You go to a hotel and you have a room number, and when you check out, you already forgot it. How come after 70 years you remember a number and it's the right number?
It's amazing. Well,
okay, so
Chaim, I just want to thank you.
Yes. I hope my message is clear enough, because the only message is we have to take care that it never happens, and we have to deserve a better future.
So Chaim, this is your book, which you so kindly have given me, but more than
Yes,
this
you
is,
want to take a picture?
yeah, but
Good.
more than that, there are no words to thank you. Chaim, you are
Yeah.
a hero.
You have to
hero.
remember that it is me who has to thank you. I've never seen a person who is so understanding and empathic. Because you genuinely do it for the benefit of others.
No, but the truth is that your story and what your parents went through, and you and your brother, it's just unbelievable. It's miracles upon miracles that your grandmother had the thought to go and to put you on another train.
Yes.
You wouldn't be here.
But don't forget that we left behind our great-grandmother, and it's something that is painful for all the survivors of the Holocaust. Had episodes like that when you ask yourself, why didn't I save her? I saved myself. But this is how life is, and this is the reality.
And I don't know, I was thinking when you were speaking, you became professor, you became head of internal medicine at Shaare Zedek, your brother won a Nobel Prize. It's amazing to think from your family what you and your brother achieved, and you think of all those that were cut down, and are no more.
But now it is really my grandchildren
and all your grandchildren,
and the great-grandchildren. Yeah.
And they've all followed in your footsteps, and they're all...
This is the prize, yes.
Well, I am
Thank you
eternally
very
grateful.
much.
I cannot thank you
Please
enough.
send me
Every word
a
is so precious, but thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so the title of the book is But I Have Sent You for Piano Lessons. Now, why did I take this title? To show how unprepared we were, not for Hebrew or religion, but for the mentality necessary to survive in Israel. My mother was, she devoted herself to raising up the two boys, and she saved us during the difficult times. And then she thought we deserved the best education. So in Israel, they registered us to private school, the best high school at that time, Male. Our teacher was Leibovich and other celebrities. And she also insisted on doing lessons in piano for myself and the violin for my brother. When I was, a few days before our marriage, my mother took me aside. She was very embarrassed by the fact that as new Olim, she couldn't support us. Nothing. And she said, I'm uneasy about not paying for your new life and so forth, but please remember that I saved no expense on your education, and I sent you to piano lessons. And piano lessons for a Sabra in Jerusalem, totally unnecessary. You don't earn any credit among your peers by saying, well, I go to piano lessons twice a week and my mother is paying for it. So this is the mentality, and I see it in others also. The Russians come here, they spend their last ruble on salvaging the piano, and we had the piano from Hungary. So this is what you had to learn here, that the values of the past are maybe irrelevant, but maybe the other way around, that your values are the right values, and the attitude or the casualness of Israel is for general education. That is the wrong.
No, now you know.
Darabah,
So
thank you
this is
so
one
much.
more message I leave for the future generations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.